You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Athan Hristodulu.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another Power Rankings edition of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Athan Hristodulu, and today, working our way through the NFC, we are discussing the NFC South division, a division that holds the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers, and then a lot of question marks following after them. This is another division where, there's like one team that's solidly in its place, and then it's a bunch of like who's going where as far as the rest of the division is concerned. And I'm sure you can kind of guess who's sitting at the top. Now, today, for the NFC South, to kind of explain my organizing for this one, there is a lot of changing going on between the Saints, the Panthers, the Falcons. There's big names that are gone from teams and they have moved elsewhere or retired. There's, new signal callers going into positions. There's just so many questions for them. So be prepared for this one. This is a power rankings that I'm not married to in any way. That's for sure. So many questions for this division outside of the Buccaneers. And, I had a really hard time putting this one together and really feeling okay with where I'm putting everybody. But this list is probably like the best summary I could give of the division. And I guess where I think is, the best spots for these teams to go. Now, we're going to kick things off with number 4. If you have not watched a Power Rankings video before, to my left, you will start to see a bunch of graphics come up as I go through worst to first for the teams. And at the number 4 spot for the NFC South, we start with the Carolina Panthers. Now, this is a team, and I'll come out and say this first, that it was like a really weird team that lost a lot of games, but they lost them close. They lost 8 games by 8 points or less, and I think it was like 5 of them that were within like 7 or 6 or less. I can't remember the exact number, but 8 games by 8 points or less. That's literally a score that it could have been a tie or potentially a win, or they've gone into overtime and maybe won the game. I'd like to make note of losses. They didn't have Christian McCaffrey for all but 3 games of the season. So, there was bringing in Teddy Bridgewater, like a change at the quarterback position. There was so much going on for Carolina this year that I wasn't really surprised with how things kind of turned out. I was pretty hopeful with Teddy Bridgewater, solidifying the position, but injuries, I would say, kind of got the best of this team, especially early on. Losing Christian McCaffrey, who is, a complete game wrecker and game changer. That really hurts the offense. That kind of ran through him and is the reason he has, a 5-year, $90 million deal with the team. Now, they're starting over again at quarterback. They brought in Sam Darnold. This is a guy that he's like a very polarizing quarterback. Some people either think that he's going to blossom being in a new system because he was over in New York and, prior to the regime they have now, New York was an absolute mess over there. Now, there's other people who think Sam Darnold has shown all he can do and he's not going to be any better. And if he is, it might be a little bit because he has some slightly better pieces around him. But I'm among the group that Sam Darnold is going to get a second chance. He is so young. He has a really good opportunity to blossom with Christian McCaffrey at running back. There's some young pieces there at receiver as well. So there's some things to like. I think that, and on top of that, the Panthers went ahead and they got the 5th-year option for him as well. So, there's a solid reason to believe, I would say, that, the Panthers could push to be the number 3 team in this division this year. But I think that, just starting over at signal caller and, you don't really know where this team stands with some of the losses. Losing Curtis Samuel on the offense was really tough. So, there's going to be a lot to look at for this team. So I'm comfortable sitting them at the number 4 spot. But there's other big question marks on the other teams that, could potentially kick them into the number 4 spot as well. Like I said, 2, 3, and 4 was very hard for me to put together on this list. There's a lot of young talent coming in. Whether that talent succeeds or not in the league produces as quickly as I'm sure this team is hoping for them to do will remain to be seen. But, you have some really good talent coming in. They have probably the best draft class out of all 4 teams in this division. You're looking at J.C. Horn, Terrace Marshall, Brady Christensen, and Chuba Hubbard. So much to like about their draft class. And again, in my opinion, probably the best draft class in the NFC South. But again, a lot of question marks and reliance on newcomers is probably the biggest reason I wanted to stick them at the number 4 spot. Now, Coming in at number 3, and this was a really hard one because I'm really torn on who belonged at number 2 and number 3, and I almost slipped these guys into the number 4 spot because of so many losses this offseason, but I have the New Orleans Saints stuck down here at number 3. Now, big question mark at quarterback. Is it going to be Jameis Winston? Is it going to be Taysom Hill? My personal opinion, I think that it's going to be Jameis Winston. This is something that has weirdly not been covered enough. I have seen stuff talked about it, but apparently Jameis Winston had been playing with really poor eyesight prior to, when he was in his years at Tampa Bay. And it was just how he lived and how he kind of knew life. Now, as somebody who has gotten LASIK surgery myself, and I was a very difficult time seeing without contacts and glasses growing up for literally the entirety of my life up until I got it done almost 3 years ago now. Crazy how much better you can see. And I don't know how bad his eyesight was, but if it was anything as bad as mine and he wasn't wearing anything to, help supplement that, and, whether he was wearing contacts lenses or not, I don't know. But if he was not doing anything to help that vision while playing games, but he was still putting up, ridiculous amounts of touchdowns, but also ridiculous amounts of interceptions, I would like to believe, having spent a year with Sean Payton's system, learning from what Drew Brees was doing, I'm kind of excited to see how Jameis Winston ends up as the quarterback for this team. Again, I'm going to peg him as the winner. I think keeping Taysom Hill as a kind of gadget player, the way they're using them, would require them to not have him starting as the quarterback. We did get a little bit of a glimpse of how this team operated with Taysom and Jameis last year, but ultimately I think that Jameis Winston is the better quarterback of the two and makes the most sense in my opinion. On top of that, you saw what Drew Brees said to him. This was your team now in that playoff game, so I have a strong feeling that it's going to end up being Jameis Winston at the end of the quarterback race here, I guess you'd want to call it. But again, there is some uncertainty at the position. You don't know how good he is going to be comparative to how Drew Brees was operating that same offense. On top of that, the Saints entered the offseason in salary cap hell, $100 million over the cap. They lost a fair amount of players. You're looking at players like Sheldon Rankins, Janoris Jenkins, Emmanuel Sanders, Jared Cook, Alec Anzalone. There's just so many losses on this team that they had to endure. It's going to be tough to make up for some of those losses. You can argue left and right, how much some of these players were contributing to the team. I think the Sheldon Rankins one's probably the most significant of them all. 6.5 sacks for him last year. He was a strong piece up in the center there for that defensive line. So it'll be a lot to look at, but I don't feel as though they were able to recoup as much as they lost. They didn't really make any splashy moves or anything big in free agency, obviously because of the situation they were in. They're going to really have to rely heavily on their draft class to produce and make up for some of the lost production they had this year. So that is why I'm sticking them at the number 3 position. Now, coming in at number 2, I have the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this is a team that they did lose some significant players. They lost Keanu Neal. They lost Alex Mack, their center. They also lost Julio Jones just recently, a few weeks ago, to a trade there to Tennessee. So some big pieces are lost from the team. But from the draft class, which was a solid draft class, nothing to write home about, but definitely not the worst draft class in the league as far as those go. But they did bring in Kyle Pitts, who pretty much the consensus everyone believes is that he's going to end up being like an all-pro type of player. I'm amongst that group. I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a generational talent, just the way he played the tight end position in college. And, I think he's going to blossom in this league, whether it's Jameis Winston throwing him the football. Not Jameis Winston. Matt Ryan throwing him the football, or somebody else a few years down the road if they find Matt Ryan's replacement. I think that, Kyle Pitts is going to have a really strong career. On top of that, they also were able to bring in Richie Grant, who could mitigate these losses for the team. The way I see it is like you lose Julio Jones, who's a perennial all-pro, but you bring in a tight end who should be a game changer and a game wrecker for you guys to supplement that loss. Calvin Ridley looks really good as well. So, we'll see how that whole thing works out. But Richie Grant could be a solid, safety replacement for them as well, along with some other later picks that they had. Matt Ryan, in my opinion, still one of the better quarterbacks in the league. He might not be having the years that he was having back when Kyle Shanahan was still running the offense and he was winning an MVP award and bringing the Falcons to the Super Bowl. However, I still think he has some good football left for at least another couple of years. I know that there was rumors that he was going to get traded and Julio Jones. It ended up just being Jones. But I feel that Julio Jones in their situation was a little bit more expendable. Matt Ryan, I think, still can really throw the football, at least for another couple of years over there in Atlanta. I'd be shocked if he ends up not being there there next year as well. I think that, unless they get some monster deal for Matt Ryan, which would be an indication of he had a really good year, or somebody's really desperate to try to bring in a quarterback because they think that's all that they need left for the team, remains to be seen. But I mean, if Matt Ryan has a strong year, he's not going anywhere. And they're not going to take that offer. So that's kind of how I look at their quarterbacking situation. On top of that, they have a really good coaching staff that they've just brought in, or at least it's on the upswing. A lot of people are feeling positive about it. It could lead some bumps into the road. You never know. Some players might not get quite the production they had in the previous regime there. But there's a lot to like with what's going on in Atlanta. I would say that I expect them to do a little bit better than New Orleans just because of the amount of losses that New Orleans ended up taking. So I'm somewhat comfortable sticking them at the number 2 spot. But I mean, if there's anything that I can go by, there's a handful of years that I've picked Atlanta to be a strong contender in the NFC, and then they bottomed out at like 4-12 or 5-11. So I could be totally wrong about putting them here at number 2. But I think that they should be a pretty strong team in this division, looking at like 8, 9, maybe even 10 wins if everything goes well for them. Now, coming in at number 1, probably not a surprise to anybody here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the defending Super Bowl champions. I mean, there's not really a ton to say about this team. They brought back the entire team from last year, which is like an unheard of situation where it's literally just running it back for another Super Bowl run. There's players on that roster this year that I pegged to go other places, and I cannot believe that they were able to, work their salary cap magic and bring this whole team back together. So absurd that they're bringing the entire Super Bowl team back to just run it back again with Brady leading the way. On top of that, for anyone who wasn't really watching the Buccaneers, once they lost that game to Kansas City in week 12 and they came back from their bye week in 13, I mean, this team, whatever they did during that bye week, and if maybe it was just the culmination of them really starting to pick up steam and getting things put together those last few weeks before the bye, I mean, Tampa Bay looked like leaps and bounds the best team in the league, from defense to offense to special teams. Everything was just looking really good about them, and having a whole offseason together now, having a year of experience as a group together now, I mean, there's no reason to believe that this team can't win 13, 14, 15 games minimum. I mean, I do not foresee them having like an 11-6 year or like a 12-5. I think 13 plus wins is probably realistic for this team, just based off how good they played this year and how strongly last year and how strongly they finished the year as well. On top of that, I mean, you have the Tom Brady factor. I don't care who you are. I mean, if you don't like Tom Brady, it's because you're hating on Tom Brady and the success he has. If you want to say that the referees have been handing him Super Bowl wins, like, say what you want, but I'm sorry. The legacy's there. You can't deny 7 rings. He just went to the NFC and in his first year won a Super Bowl. Like, I'm a big Peyton Manning fan. I love Peyton Manning. His jersey sits right above me every single day that I sit at this desk. I also have a Brady jersey sitting behind me as well, because I'm a big fan of watching elite quarterbacks do their thing. And I mean, Brady has just had an outstanding career. He took a team that wasn't even in a playoff contention last year and won the Super Bowl the following year. Did they bring in a lot of pieces? Yeah, but why'd they come? Because of Tom Brady. He spent the entire week leading up to the Super Bowl telling his team, we are going to win this game. We are going to win this game. And what did they do? Oh, they won the game. And I even bet against them. I picked the Chiefs to win that game. I was on the Chiefs bandwagon, and I lost that bet. Tampa Bay, going to be the number 1, 2, or 3 seed at worst, in my opinion, for the NFC next year. There's no reason to not list them as the best team in this division and arguably the best team in the NFC. I don't really see who you could argue as far as talent goes, leadership goes, coaching goes. I mean, they're just leaps and bounds the top team in the NFC, in my opinion, and I'd be shocked if they weren't running it back for a deep playoff run and maybe even representing the NFC in the Super Bowl again next year. So that is my power rankings for the NFC South division. I would love to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Fire away, argue your points and opinions. I love to chat with anyone who has an opinion on things. I know that these division rankings can get real testy, so please let me know. But if you enjoy the content we're doing, like, comment, share, subscribe. But that is it for me today. I appreciate you all for watching. I am, again, Athan Hristodulu. Have a good rest of your evening, everyone. I'll catch you guys in another video.